For centuries, the Roman Empire symbolized boundless power, unfurling its banners from the shores of the Atlantic to the river Euphrates, and from the scorching sands of the Sahara to the vast plains of northern Europe. Millions lived under its dominion, while its engineers constructed enduring roads and magnificent cities, and its army struck terror across the known world. Yet, there was one land Rome never truly conquered. An impregnable region, cloaked in dense forests and crisscrossed by turbulent rivers. A land without cities, empires, or a single ruler, inhabited only by scattered tribes. These barbarians, as the Romans called them, lived freely, armed with spears and an indomitable ferocity, refusing to bow before Rome's might. This land, known as Germania, became an unhealing wound for the Romans. This is a narrative of how the most powerful empire of antiquity suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of peoples who lacked even their own statehood, and why this defeat irrevocably altered the course of European history, shaping its future trajectory. For the Romans, accustomed to naming, shaping, and delineating everything, Germania presented a stark contrast. It was not a country, a kingdom, or a province, but a vast expanse of forests, swamps, and mountains stretching beyond the Rhine into the heart of untamed Europe. Here, there was no centralized government or single capital, only dozens of disparate tribes, each with its own chieftain, laws, and beliefs. Some were nomadic, others settled, but all were fiercely independent and deeply distrustful of any external authority. During his Gallic campaigns, Julius Caesar, confronted with a multitude of disparate tribes, didn't trouble himself with learning their individual names and characteristics. The Romans, with their penchant for order and systematization, chose to unite these peoples under a single, overarching term: the Germans. This simplified the task of identification and confronting the potential threat emanating from the northern territories. However, Germania, as the Romans imagined it, was a distant and alien land. It didn't conform to their accustomed notions of a civilized world. There were no paved roads, majestic columns, bustling forums, or exquisite marble temples. Yet, despite the absence of these hallmarks of Roman civilization, the Germanic tribes were characterized by their pride, preserved their history, and offered tenacious resistance to invaders. The Roman Empire embodied order and a strict hierarchy. Written laws and a clear power structure, manifested in marble and steel, governed the life of every citizen. The emperor stood at the head of the state, followed by senators, magistrates, merchants, soldiers, and slaves. Each element within this complex system fulfilled its function, ensuring efficient governance and continuous conquests. Germania, however, presented a complete antithesis to Roman order. There was no senate, no emperor. The Germanic tribes lived in close harmony with nature, sustaining themselves through hunting and agriculture. Their lives were governed not by written laws, but by oral traditions and customs passed down through generations. Chieftains were elected at popular assemblies, their authority founded on merit and the respect of their kinsmen. In times of war, temporary leaders were appointed, their leadership qualities determining the outcome of battles. While the Roman Empire was famed for its straight, paved roads, the Germanic tribes preferred to navigate secluded forest paths, hidden from prying eyes. Where Romans erected magnificent baths and theaters, symbols of their civilization, the Germans performed their religious rites, worshipping sacred trees, mysterious lakes, and inaccessible mountains. Their beliefs were infused with myths of Odin and Thor, and ancient spirits dwelling in mist and thunder. To the Romans, these customs seemed little more than superstitions, yet for the Germans, they constituted the very essence of their existence and worldview. These were two utterly distinct perspectives on the world, seemingly incapable of coexistence. One yearned for total control and order, while the other prized freedom and independence above all else. The clash of these two worlds was, alas, inevitable. The Roman Empire, with its insatiable thirst for power, could not tolerate white spots on its map. For Augustus, the first Roman emperor, Germania appeared to be an irritating void that needed to be filled. This was less about gold or glory and more about strategic considerations. Beyond the Rhine lived warlike tribes who sporadically raided Roman territory, plundering villas and vanishing without a trace into the dense forests. Thus began an ambitious campaign, aiming to transform Germania into another Roman province, subjugating it to Roman authority. Legions, one after another, advanced deep into Germanic territory, crushing resistance tribe by tribe. Some were vanquished in bloody battles, while others surrendered without a fight, enticed by promises of Roman order, road construction, trade development, and the establishment of long-awaited stability. It seemed Augustus's cherished dream was on the verge of fulfillment, and Germania would be definitively conquered and tamed by Roman civilization. To consolidate these gains, Publius Quinctilius Varus was appointed to the province, an experienced politician, not a military commander. The Roman Empire, confident in its power, viewed him less as an army leader and more as an efficient administrator capable of ensuring tax collection, conducting censuses, and implementing Roman laws. However, this decision proved to be a fatal error. Upon arriving in Germania, Varus behaved like an autocrat, disregarding local customs and imposing Roman ways. He introduced burdensome taxes, issued edicts without consulting the indigenous inhabitants, and treated Germanic chieftains as mere vassals, stripped of all dignity. Varus failed to grasp that many of these peoples had been subdued not by force of arms, but by a trust in Rome, which he irrevocably shattered through his arrogance and ignorance. Amidst this pervasive discontent, a man destined to play a decisive role in history gradually emerged. Arminius, a scion of Germanic nobility, fluent in Latin, intimately familiar with Roman military tactics and the army's weaknesses, managed to unite the disparate tribes around him and spearhead a liberation movement. In 9 AD, 3 Roman legions, led by the overconfident governor Varus, marched deep into Germanic territory, believing they were quelling a minor uprising. They had no inkling they were heading straight into a meticulously prepared trap. Arminius, a young Germanic chieftain raised in Rome and seemingly a loyal ally, had for years feigned friendship with the Romans. Now, having united several tribes under his command, he chose the ideal ambush site, the dense and impassable Teutoburg forest. The ancient forest bore silent witness to the impending tragedy. Roman legionaries, forging their way along winding tracks, became mired in mud under torrential rain, oblivious to the lurking danger. In the shadows of the trees, like phantoms, Germanic warriors lay poised, awaiting their moment. In these constricted conditions, battle formations were impossible to deploy. There was no room for maneuver. Only an endless column of soldiers, squeezed between the gloomy silence of the forest, thick fog, and piercing cold. Then came the moment of truth. A furious assault descended upon the Romans from both flanks. Thousands of Germanic warriors, as if unleashed from the underworld, delivered a devastating blow. The element of surprise was overwhelming. Chaos and panic engulfed the Roman column. Orders were forgotten, strategies crumbled, and only despair remained. Varus desperately tried to restore order, but in vain. Legions perished, one after another, in this bloody slaughter. The merciless carnage continued for 3 days, and the Roman army was utterly annihilated. Varus, cornered, took his own life, preferring death to the dishonor of capture. This defeat was not merely a military setback, but a symbol of profound humiliation. For the first time, Rome faced such a widespread annihilation in territory it considered its own. This moment became a critical turning point. Rome, accustomed to victories, could not reconcile itself to defeat, especially one so crushing. News of the bloody massacre in the Teutoburg forest was like an earthquake, shaking the very foundations of the empire. 3 legions, over 15,000 warriors, vanished without a trace into the mists of the distant forest. There were no captives, no hope of ransom. Only mutilated bodies, Germanic spears, and the ominous silence that descended upon the battlefield. In the echoing silence, like a distant reverberation of a long-fought battle, Emperor Augustus remained, whose will had once transformed the Roman Republic into a vast empire. Legends recount that in his sleepless nights, his voice, trembling with despair, repeatedly pleaded, "Varus, give me back my legions." But the legions, fallen in the Germanic forests, were lost forever. This catastrophe was not merely a crushing military defeat, but a profound psychological trauma for Rome. For the first time, the shadow of fear loomed over the eternal city, fear of an indomitable spirit, of an enemy that could not be subdued by gold, by the construction of new cities, or by the promise of Roman citizenship. The repercussions of this tragedy proved indelible. Rome abandoned its ambitious plans to conquer Germania, not due to a weakening of military might, but from the realization that there were peoples willing to embrace death in the struggle for freedom rather than endure a miserable existence under a foreign yoke. Thus, a new border was drawn, becoming not merely a geographical line on a map, but an invisible wall dividing 2 worlds. To the west of the Rhine stretched civilization, order, and Caesar's authority, while to the east lay boundless wild forests, where tribal liberty and an indomitable rebellious spirit reigned supreme. From then on, every Roman emperor who cast a glance towards Germania did so with a sense of deep respect and apprehension. For it was in those somber forests that Rome lost not only its warriors, but also the sacred illusion of its own invincibility. The echo of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest did not fade into the annals of history. On the contrary, it transformed into an ominous symbol, an eternal reminder that even the most powerful empire can suffer a crushing defeat if it dares to underestimate a people's will for freedom. For centuries, the territory of Germania remained a mosaic of disparate tribes. There was no overarching unity in the form of an empire or a national banner, yet a shared historical memory persisted, the triumphant night when the Germans prevailed over the Roman Empire. It was a moment when freedom-loving peoples managed to defy the most formidable war machine of the ancient world, and this memory was passed down through generations. While the Roman Empire continued its journey, replete with triumphs and upheavals, the Germanic tribes in the forests preserved their spirit of rebellion and defiance, allowing them to withstand centuries of assimilation. Paradoxically, the Roman Empire never again attempted to conquer Germania. Yet, Germania, in its own way, conquered Rome when the barbarian peoples, descendants of those who had once resisted, crossed the empire's weakened borders and shattered it from within. Among them were even descendants of Arminius. History is full of irony. Rome suffered defeat in battle, and believed it had retreated with dignity. Yet, in that retreat, it left a seed of resistance that was destined to germinate centuries later into an unstoppable wave. This was not an immediate victory, it was a delayed vengeance. The legacy of the Teutoburg Forest lies not merely in military victory, but also in its human dimension. It serves as a reminder that power, devoid of wisdom, transforms into arrogance, and that freedom, when defended with utter devotion, can stand against even the most formidable empire of its time. Germanic history is not merely a chronicle of battlefield defeats. It is a narrative of an invisible boundary, insurmountable even for the most formidable empires, the soul of a people who rebelled against submission. For no swords and conquests, no laws and cities, can break a people who have not surrendered their spirit. And the Germans never surrendered theirs. While the Roman Empire immortalized its grandeur in stone, the Germanic forests preserved their history, written in blood, silence, and the yearning for freedom. And today, millennia later, the echoes of that resistance resonate throughout the world. They live within everyone who rejects injustice, who fights for their dignity, for the right to their identity and a life unchained. Germania taught humanity a crucial lesson. History is not always written by the triumphant. Sometimes, its creators are those unwilling to acknowledge defeat.